Ho, ho, ho.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Engage 8 podcast. I'm your host, Zach, with my two co-hosts, Josh and Mike. Before we get into it, would like to ask for you guys to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Our socials are in the description down below. We've got TikTok for some more short form content if that's your preference, and we got Spotify as well if you prefer an audio format. Now, with that out of the way, this week we're going to be going after the week 16 recap, I believe. That's 16 total games because we're recording a little late. Yesterday was Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody who's watching or listening. And yeah, you want to get us started with some Saints and Rams on Thursday night, Josh?
I will Thursday night. Seems like forever ago, almost a week at this point. But Saints and Rams. The Rams dominated most of this game. If you just looked at the box score, you might think otherwise, but overall, the Rams were in control of this game basically from the start. The Saints were only in this game really because they had a blocked punt late. They scored a couple touchdowns late. So it looked a lot closer than it ended up actually being. Derek Carr finished with a good stat line overall, but it's pretty inflated. He didn't play phenomenal, as anybody who watched the game knows. But overall, if you're just looking at his stat sheet, he overall looked pretty good in that realm. But the Rams are now in a very solid spot for the wild cards in an 8-7. They're in a position to go get that 7 seed or the 6 seed, possibly match up with the Lions and get that matchup that everyone on social media is talking about now with the in Detroit in the first weekend. And the Saints, on the other hand, now they're tied with the Falcons at 7-8 for second in the NFC South, which basically means no playoffs if you get second in the NFC South. The Bucks got a big win over the Jags this past week, putting them at 8-7. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but the Saints were looking good. They were beating the hell out of bad teams the past couple weeks. They ran into a good team and they paid the price.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out aside from the Derek Carr, like just being very up and down in most drives this season, Chris Olave has really emerged in the second half of this year. I don't have all the exact numbers, but it feels like recently he's been putting over like 100 yards after 100 yards after 100 yards. He's been phenomenal in playing with an inconsistent quarterback. That's really tough to do, and just I'm impressed with what he's been doing. But with the Rams, we talked about it before. Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, those three have been a phenomenal trio for Stafford, whether they're running the ball or throwing it. And believe it or not, all three of them got carries this week. And Stafford, he was very efficient, no turnovers. Kyron Williams got over 100 yards again. It's like clockwork with him whenever he's healthy. And Puka, another phenomenal game for the rookie, 9 catches, 164 yards, and a touchdown. I'm sure he's a finalist for some of our stud of the week picks. But outside of that, the Rams they're in very easy position to make the playoffs. They win out 10-7. They're most likely going to make a wild card spot. I'm really hoping, like you said, Josh, that Rams Lions. I think that's a phenomenal wild card weekend matchup, and I'm hoping for it honestly.
That would be a crazy game. Rams have won five of their last six. Matt Stafford is looking great, 328 yards and two touchdowns. He has 14 touchdowns and one interception in the Rams' last 5 games. He's thrown multiple touchdown passes in 5 straight games for only the third time in his career. He has been incredible. If he was healthy all season, you might almost be in the MVP conversation. Puka Nakua, he continues his great rookie season, like you said, Zach. He's got to right now, I'd say, be the runner up for offensive rookie of the year behind CJ Stroud. And Kyron Williams, like you said, Zach, has been phenomenal. Saints just did not have the firepower to keep up with this Rams offense. Uh, Rams had 458 total yards. Their offense just absolutely dominated this game. And I think they're going to make the playoffs. And a Lions matchup, I don't think that'd be good for the Lions, but this Rams team is scary.
Yep, moving on here to some Saturday games. Bengals at Steelers. I love how the NFL just completely just takes over Saturdays the second college football gets up out of there. But they did it again this week. Bengals at Steelers. The Steelers dominated this game from start to finish. They were up 24-0 at half. Steelers and Mason Rudolph just played well the whole game in his first start this season, first start since 2021. I'm seeing a lot of on Twitter Steelers fans, which one of the most volatile fan bases in all of sports, as far as like what I've seen on social media. One day they want Mike Tomlin gone. One day they want any of the three quarterbacks starting. Now they're fully on Mason Rudolph. I've seen most people saying they want Rudolph even when Pickett gets healthy at this point after just one game, which is a little bit crazy in my eyes. But Steelers defense, they went out there, they created turnovers. That's going to be the recipe for success for them. They are everything with this team, and they need to continue to be that to win games going forward. Now, The Bengals had a long touchdown in the second half. That was really their only big moment all game. They were dominated from start to finish, but they are still sitting at 8-7, which is pretty good for the AFC. You want to be in that. You want to be above 500 at this point. Any of the teams like the Broncos who are 7-8, all those 7-8 teams are in a tough spot right now where they have to win out and they need a lot of help. The Bengals don't need a ton of help, but they do need to continue winning games here. And overall, big win for the Steelers. Mike Tomlin's going to finish over 500 again.
I definitely want to see that. He is either I believe, a win or a tie from being 500 or better this year while they're sitting at 8-7. So that's definitely great to see. I love Mike Tomlin. He's a great coach, and he showed how great of a coach he is today. Third string quarterback Mason Rudolph, ironically, 2 days before Christmas, he comes out, looks like he just flat out dominated. He was able to hit the short, deep, intermediate passes, rarely just made a bad pass with poor accuracy. Najee Harris looked like the first round pick that the Steelers hoped he would be when they drafted him. George Pickens had 4 catches, almost 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm surprised he didn't get called for taunting on that one touchdown where he looked back and pointed at the guy right before he went into the end zone. I thought that was awesome. I've been a big George Pickens guy ever since he came out of Georgia. I was hoping the Bears would take him, but it is what it is. Jake Browning, he was a little disappointing against the really good defense, actually, but those 3 picks are something you got to hope that you keep under control on the road. You don't want to turn the ball over when you're on the road in a tough environment. As we know, Pittsburgh, when they get renegade going in the fourth quarter, it's a real tough place to play. Joe Mixon wasn't giving him too much help. Rough day on the ground, under 50 yards again. T. Higgins, he did have that one really long touchdown, like you mentioned, Josh, but other than that, he didn't really step up in Jamar Chase's absence as well as he could have, in my opinion. Speaking of Jamar Chase, they missed him today, or not today, on Saturday. They really needed him, and it's really unfortunate that he's probably going to be out for maybe 1 or 2 more weeks.
Yeah, Rudolph dominates on the eve of Christmas Eve. I predicted that this could happen. Sadly, I didn't pick it to happen, but George Pickens, really good bounce back week. Like you said, Zach, he looked very good out there. 4 catches for 195 yards. He almost had that Randy Moss stat line from a long time ago. Mason Rudolph, 2+ years of waiting, comes in and has one of the best games of his career. This is the most points the Steelers have scored in a game since 2020. And Jaylen Warren was able to back up his talk. He had the very nice block on the touchdown run. And he said he would do it for George Pickens, and he did it for Calvin Austin. But Bengals just didn't have it. No Jamar Chase. Their offense really couldn't move the ball well in this great Steelers defense. He had 335 passing yards, but 3 interceptions. You're not going to win many games when you lose a turnover battle like that. First Steelers sweep of the Bengals since 2019. And like you guys said, the Steelers just need one more to get to that 500 record for Tomlin.
Yep, moving on here to Saturday night football. Bills and Chargers. The Bills, one of the hottest teams in football, if not the hottest, kind of struggled this game against maybe the coldest team in football in the Chargers. A muffed punt in this game kept LA in it early. They capitalized on that. They kind of stayed in there the whole game after that muffed punt. Another James Cook fumble. Almost lost the Bills this game overall, which would have been very bad for them. Now they're up to 9 wins, which basically guarantees them a playoff spot at this point, unless they absolutely implode. So they were in a position where they could have lost this game and just absolutely messed up everything they had going for them on this run to the playoffs. But they didn't. They held on. It seems like whenever the Bills like have looked hot this season, like for example, early when they were beating the hell out of bad teams and they beat the Dolphins, then they have a couple losses that just don't make any sense. They were on a tear leading up to this game. They almost did it again and lost to a bad team. Instead, they just struggled. You can't do that in the playoffs. You can't win a couple games and then take a game off. Obviously, in the playoffs, they will be playing teams, good teams. They won't be playing bad teams, so they won't have a chance to struggle against bad teams just because they're not going to be playing them. But overall, um, as much as I love this Bills team when they're really, really good and when they're winning games against great teams, like they beat the Cowboys and the way they played against the Eagles and the Chiefs, of course, they looked great. They look like one of the best teams in the league. They look like they can win the Super Bowl. But overall, they're just too inconsistent for me. I could see them going in there, winning a game. I mean, I know they still have a chance to win the division. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Miami beats them in week 18, but you can't do that in the playoffs. They are not going to be one of my teams that I think can win the Super Bowl when the playoffs come around. But you never know. They have the talent to go do it. Just will they execute?
I don't know about you guys, but I found this game very, very similar to the game against the Giants that the Bills had a month or so ago. They were just letting a really rough team just hang around and almost win it at the end. Definitely a lot closer with the Giants game, but this one, it didn't feel too much different. Backup quarterback, and they just somehow kept moving the ball. They just never closed out the game. Buffalo, obviously, they've got the explosiveness on offense with Diggs and Gabe Davis. Unfortunately, Diggs was just very absent, only 5 catches for 29 yards. Feels like he's been very quiet the last month or so. It's really unfortunate, and I guess you can say that Josh Allen's lack of pass attempts the last couple weeks could be involved in that, but you really got to hope that he gets a little bit more involved come playoff time because you're not going to have success not going to your best guy. On the Charger side, just throw out the tape of the season. I mean, sure, you stuck with him. Maybe Easton Stick can be a reliable backup for you. Eckler, I think they're going to let him walk this offseason. Josh Palmer, he's been really nice. Quentin Johnson, I feel like he had a couple chances to make some big plays, especially in the run blocking game. Couldn't really make it happen. But yeah, they were missing Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and a lot of receiving threats, and obviously their starting quarterback. Just get to next year, hit a couple home runs in the draft, maybe first round, maybe later rounds, and try and contend for the AFC West next year.
Yeah, the Bills made this game a lot closer than it should have been. The Chargers, they came out, they played tough. They went up 10-0 early. They looked like pretty solid in the first game without Staley. They came out with energy, but they couldn't get it done late. They've lost 6 of their last 7, which is good for their tank. Easton Stick looked okay, like you guys said. Cameron Dicker looked great, the kicker. He's been very good. He had a career high 5 field goals in this game. But Josh Allen, they were able to find a way to win this game, this offense. James Cook, I think he only had 70 yards on the ground, but Josh Allen, first player in NFL history with 4 consecutive seasons of 40 combined touchdowns. And he's now the second quarterback to reach 50 career rushing touchdowns. So he's been most of their rushing attack in his career. He leads the league in the total touchdowns this year. He's got 13 rushing, 27 passing, 40 total, and was able to get this team to win again. We got the random Gabe Davis breakout game that we seem to get every 4 weeks or so. 4 catches for 140 yards. Stephon Diggs, like you guys said, he's been quiet recently. They're going to have to figure that out. You got to be able to get the ball to your best weapon. And that game with the Miami Dolphins in Week 18 is going to be a big one. And I think the Bills get it done, to be honest with you. The way they played against the Dolphins earlier this year, they dominated them. But it is a different team. I still think they find a way to get it done.
Nothing with play style, just with production. Gabe Davis is on some like Tyler Lockett shit of like he'll be quiet for like 5 games and then he'll get you 6 catches, 200 yards, and a touchdown somehow.
Yeah.
But regardless, we'll move on here. Lions and Vikings. I just want to start this off by saying to all my Lions fans out there, especially those that are under the age of 32 and have been watching this team for a decade plus, just be nothing but garbage. We had a couple competitive seasons where we got 10 wins, lost in the first round of the playoffs under Caldwell in that Calvin Johnson era. I just want to say to all of you, we did it. Finally, NFC North champs for the first time in franchise history. Haven't won the division since it was the Central in 1993. A lot of us didn't get to see Barry. We see nothing but poverty, and it feels good to finally have a team that's out there winning and nothing but excited to watch them every week. Dan Campbell, he was on the 0-16 Lions team. That was just the absolute rock bottom for this franchise. And now he gets to be a part of leading the Lions to their first division title ever. So that's huge just for the organization, for him. Just happy to have him at the helm. The Lions played super well this game in Minnesota. They had some slip ups. They almost let the Vikings come back late. The last 2 times they played in Minnesota under Dan Campbell, the Vikings did come back late and steal 2 games at home. The Lions did not let that happen this time. They sealed it out. They won the game. Ifeatu Melifonwu had the game sealing pick. He's been phenomenal for the Lions in the past 3 weeks. He's been on the team 3 years now. He got benched a couple years ago. He hasn't been playing well at all. He comes back and plays just a great 3 games. He's going to be a starter. I honestly do think as this CJ Gardner Johnson still comes back, I could see, and I was just throwing this out there on Twitter after the Lions game. I could see a scenario where maybe you run Cam Sutton, cornerback 1, Brian Branch, cornerback 2, have CJ Gardner Johnson, CD Deuce play the nickel, and then you let Kirby Joseph, who had 2 picks yesterday, and then Ifeatu Melifonwu, who had the game sealing pick, them two run safety. I think that's maybe a way that you could get all your best players out there because let's face it, the Lions have significantly better safeties than they have corners. So if you can find a way to move, whether it's CD Deuce or Brian Branch to corner, that would be huge. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But regardless, it's something that they could try when all their safeties come back because it would be tough to bench Iffy after how well he's played. Um, Jahmyr Gibbs is the number 6. I hate to talk fantasy football. He's the number 6 fantasy running back this season, despite how low of a usage he had earlier on. Uh, Being number 6 with basically David Montgomery taking most of the carries for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, uh, when he wasn't hurt, is insane for Jahmyr Gibbs. He's been phenomenal. CJ Stroud's kind of had a fall off. It's going to be interesting to see who wins O'Roy, but regardless, he's in the conversation. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 catches for 106 yards. He is now third in catches, fifth in yards, seventh in touchdowns. If you had to guess if DJ Moore is ahead of them in any of those stats, what would you say? Zach, you'd probably say yes, 0. He's not ahead of him in any of those, despite playing one more game. Um, Lions defense, like I said, had 4 picks. They should have had 5. Curb had 2. Branch had 1. He should have had 1 early on in the Vikings' first drive in their red zone trip. Mullins threw it right to him. He dropped it. The Vikings ended up scoring on that drive. If he would have had that pick, I don't know if this game is close. And then, like I said, if he had the game winner. Lions dominated the turnover battle this game. Goff didn't turn it over, which is always the recipe for success for the Lions. For the Lions, you run the ball, you stop the run. Goff doesn't throw picks, and you're going to win more games than you lose. The Lions now are in a position where if they win out, they guarantee get the 2 seed. They will have the tiebreaker with the Eagles. It comes down to they'll have the same conference record if they both win out. They'll obviously have the same record. They haven't played head to head this season. The difference would be just the game next week versus the Cowboys with similar opponents. Thank God that the Seahawks beat the Eagles 2 weeks ago. If not, then we would have had another tie there. But the Lions are now in a position where they can control their own destiny, get up to the 2 seed. If they win out, all they would need is the Niners to lose either against the Commanders or against the Rams. If the Niners win both those games, it'll be Niners 1, Lions 2, Eagles 3, assuming they all win out. If the Niners lose one of those games, the Lions would go up to the 1 seed, get a bye in the first round, which would be great with a lot of guys that we need to come back healthy for the playoffs. I've said about just everything I needed to say about this game. I'm just ecstatic that the Lions finally won the North. It was great to see after the game in the locker room, Dan Campbell calling up everybody like Dak and Ragnow and Tracy, all the guys that have been here for years and years and years. Dak has played 8 years with the Lions. He's seen everything from the bottom all the way up to the top now of this division, and it's just great to see. It's a great feel-good story, and the job just isn't done. You got to go win a couple more games, improve seeding, and then anything could happen when you get in the playoffs.
Well, there's a few things I want to talk about in this game. I think you covered the in-game stuff very well. Props to you for that. First off, congrats to the Lions fans. You have won the division more recently than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is a phenomenal thing to be able to say. And 2, really sorry for TJ Hawkinson, current Viking and former Lion. We found out, I believe, a couple hours ago that he tore both his ACL and MCL, done for the year. So Vikings have just been really unfortunate with injury luck to their stars this year. Kirk Cousins obviously out for the year. Jefferson was out for, I think, 6, maybe 7 weeks. And then he re-injured himself, or Dobbs re-injured him on that hospital ball his first game back. And now TJ Hawkinson is done for the year. So it's really unfortunate when they were actually having a pretty solid year and making a push for the playoffs. And speaking of Justin Jefferson, he had that phenomenal catch, and this was his first phenomenal game back. We really saw the current Justin Jefferson, one of the guys who's one of the best in the league at his position. He was great, and I think that catch was one of the almost as good as that one against Buffalo last year. I mean, against 2 defenders, he just somehow comes down with it, lands flat on his back. It was not easy. So
For a first down on
Jahmyr,
3rd and 25 or 27 or
right,
whatever
exactly.
it was.
But I mean, he just makes crazy plays, and that's what superstars do. And
Insane.
lastly, Jahmyr Gibbs, like you said, despite his poor usage at the beginning of the year, the Lions are really finding a way to integrate both him and Monty into the offense, and Gibbs is just thriving right now. He has been phenomenal as both a pass catcher and a runner. He had 2 touchdowns on 80 yards on Sunday, and I don't even know what he had receiving, but I don't think it was
4 for 20,
much.
I believe.
Yeah, 4 for 20, nice. But he's been great in both parts of the game. He also has not been a liability as a pass blocker or chip blocking as well. So Lions, they can be a pretty dangerous team if they can score points in the playoffs. And like you said, Josh, if they get their best players out there, get healthy in the secondary, they may be able to just flip the field and maybe get a defensive touchdown or two, which can send them to the next round.
Yeah, the Lions finally win the NFC North. Happy for them. Um, 30 years is a long time. A lot of people weren't alive 30 years ago, so congrats to all the Lions fans out there. Their defense wasn't great in this game, but when you're able to force 4 turnovers, that's really all you need to do. I talked about in the Bengals game, if you lose a turnover battle by that big of a margin, you're probably not going to win the game. um, Amon-Ra, great game. Jameson Williams, again, continues to get more receptions. Another game with 5 receptions, 43 yards. So that's nice to see. And then just this offense looked great. Vikings defense, which has given a lot of teams trouble, Brian Flores. Lions were able to go out there and do what they wanted to do. The Vikings offense wasn't particularly great. Justin Jefferson continues to show that he's the best receiver, like you guys said. Vikings also lost Jordan Addison early in this game to an ankle injury off of, I think, one of the interceptions. And then like you said, Zach, TJ Hawkinson, torn ACL and MCL. Vikings just have not had the injury luck this season. They've lost, obviously, Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson for most of the season. So their offense is very banged up, but they're still in a chance to make the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. But congrats to the Lions.
Yeah, just a
One last
couple
thing
more
before we
things.
get going.
Oh, go ahead.
As you were talking, Mike, I kind of thought of the whole Brian Flores thing. Do we think he goes and gets a head coaching job somewhere, or do you think he just stays as a DC like what Fangio was doing, and like just bounce around the league, or just become dominant somewhere in one place and just let the head coach take the reins and he just is full control of the defense where anything he says goes? What do we think he's gonna do?
I think you could say Minnesota.
I think he
Yeah.
would
I think
stay
that's a very
Minnesota,
valid
but
option.
I
Minnesota
Or
with a good defense could be violent.
yeah,
right. I mean, they somehow miss out on the what's it called on the playoffs, and then they're sitting at like the I don't know 15, 16 pick range, and maybe they trade up for Jaden Daniels, let him sit behind Kirk Cousins, you franchise tag him for a year, and then let Flores take control of the defense, KOC just continue going with the offense. I mean, or you just wait until the second round, get a Bo Nix or something like that. I mean, the Vikings have
that
a
sounds like a
lot
Vikings
of
pick.
ways they can go. They can
It's a
go
Vikings pick.
a lot of different directions with their personnel on their team and with the staff they have. And I'm honestly really interested and also kind of nervous because Josh, you and I, we got to see him twice a year. So
Yeah, I think the only job he would take, I think if Flores was to take a job, he'd have to really trust the owner. And I think the only job he would take if it was to become head coach would probably be the Patriots. And there's an opportunity for that this season. So,
Former coach.
yeah.
Right. I could definitely see that happening. Uh, just a couple more things I wanted to touch on that I forgot. One on the Brian Flores topic. We've said he has the highest blitz rate in the league, over 50%. The Lions held him to 1 sack. The Lions O line, when they're all playing together, they're going to be great. If the Lions O line is healthy and they get back some guys, there's a very small handful of teams that I think are genuinely better than the Lions in the entire league. Um, as far as Flores, Ben Johnson didn't forget that when Flores came to Miami, he fired Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson got his revenge and just proved that there's levels to this shit. The Vikings couldn't run the ball at all. Lions' run defense was great. That really just opened it up for forcing Nick Mullins to throw. Yeah, he gets 400 yards, but he also throws 4 picks. When you could shut down a run game and you have a quarterback that's not phenomenal, you're going to force him to throw some bad throws. And he threw 5 picks and only got 4. But yeah, just to finish this off, you said on the Jefferson catch, that was just an absurd catch. He's phenomenal. He's the best receiver in the league, hands down, no question. Before that play, Nick Mullins fumbled and the ball just kept getting kicked down all the way. I think John Kaminsky almost had it. Ball got kicked down all the way to what was it, 3rd and 27 or something ridiculous. When that happened, and then they immediately got a first down on the next play with Jefferson, I was like, I've seen this movie before. You know what
just one of
happens in this
those.
scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It always happens in Minnesota. So I was just happy to see them, like the same old Lions, lose that football game every single time. The
Right.
brand new Lions do not. So that was good to see. We can move on to another one of our teams here, even if you don't want to, Mike. Colts at Falcons. Great opening. I don't have a ton to say about the game. Great opening drive for the Colts. to start the game. Looked like they were going to be in a good spot to win this game. That was basically the extent of their offense scoring wise the entire game. The Falcons in the second half, they score on 4 or 5 possessions, 3 field goals, and their touchdown to basically seal this win off for them. Falcons defense played great. They need to continue to play great if they're going to make the playoffs, if they're going to compete against, I guess it looks like Dallas probably now in the playoffs. Whoever comes out of that division will probably play them, assuming we don't see an Eagles collapse here. The Falcons are a hard team to beat at home. We've seen it. The Colts shouldn't sweat this one too much. You're still above 500. You're still in that good pack of teams that has a great shot, especially with teams like the Bengals losing, teams like the Broncos losing, the Texans, the Jaguars. This week after this loss, this week could have gone a lot worse than it did for the Colts. So they got a lot of help this week. It would have been really nice to get this win, move up to 9-6 with all those losses, would have all but sealed the playoffs for them. But regardless, they still got a ways to go to get to the playoffs, but they're not in a horrible spot after losing this one.
Yeah, with the Falcons, like you said, huge win for them, moving within a game of 500, staying within a game of the division with Tampa and New Orleans after they lost on Thursday. But Taylor Heineke, he was okay. I mean, he didn't turn the ball over. He gave it to the playmakers. Speaking of playmakers, they finally gave it to Bijan Robinson a lot. 12 carries, 72 yards, 7 catches for 50 yards. You get your playmakers the ball in space, good things are bound to happen. Bijan was great on Sunday, and unfortunately, the Colts just couldn't do much to stop him. I won't talk too much about the Colts. I'll let you take care of that, Mike. But it seemed to me that they were missing Michael Pittman, their main chains mover on offense. He's been borderline a top 10 or been a top 10, borderline top 5 receiver this year in terms of consistency. He's been phenomenal. He's definitely someone you want to have in the wild card round if they somehow sneak in with all this crowded jumble of teams sitting at 8-7, 8-6, or 9-6, whatever the records are. And Minshew, you gotta be a little bit better, but outside of that, I don't know much else.
Yeah, I don't have much to say about the Colts, to be honest. They just got bullied in the trenches, couldn't run the football. They're missing Michael Pittman a lot. This offense was abysmal, and him not playing going into a contract offseason, this game could have got him a couple $1 million worth of money, but their offense just didn't have anything going. Josh Downs, I think, was their leading catcher. Yeah, 6 catches, 39 yards, so most receptions. Their offense just didn't have anything. They couldn't run it. They really couldn't pass it after that first possession. Just disappointing. And then the Colts defense just looked slow. Guys were just open on every possession. They were just checking it down every single play, and the Colts had no answer for a check down in this game. I don't know if they were just so worried about getting beat deep, but Gus Bradley's defense just did not have a good day at all. And Taylor Heineke just seems to own the Colts. This is back-to-back years where Taylor Heineke plays the Colts and just dominates them and finds a way to win. 229 yards and a touchdown. He had no turnovers. The Colts defense finally doesn't get a turnover in a game. That is something we've been doing all season. That has helped our offense. Didn't get in this one. And then all season, I've been begging for Arthur Smith to consistently get Bijan the ball, consistently get Pitts the ball. He really doesn't do it all season. Then they go and play the Colts. Pitts gets a touchdown. Bijan gets 7 catches, 72 rushing yards. Good game for the Falcons. They really needed this one. Arthur Smith needed this one to really keep his job. But for the Colts, still control your own destiny. You got to win next week. You need Michael Pittman back next week. He had passed concussion protocol on Friday, and then Saturday picked up symptoms, so he went back into concussion protocol. So hopefully he's back next week. If he's not, that Raiders game could be very bad for the Colts. It's basically a playoff game, especially for the Raiders. They have to win. Colts kind of need to win to keep their control of their own destiny. So big week next week.
All right, moving on here to Seahawks at Titans. Seahawks escaped barely in this game. They were down for much of this game. The Titans were on top. I know Seahawks had a couple big drives late. I know they had the 10-play, 96-yard drive for their second to last touchdown. Titans responded with a touchdown to take the lead back. That 96-yard drive was the first time the Seahawks led all game. Titans score to take the lead back, and then 14 plays, 75 yards right back at the Titans from the Seahawks. Those are two huge drives from the Seahawks when your season is literally on the line. You're coming off of a win against the Eagles where you beat them in prime time and solidify yourself as a likely playoff team. If they would have lost this one against the Titans, that would have been very tough for them. As we know, we've been saying it all season. The Seahawks played down to their opponents. They did that again this week, but if they get in the playoffs and they continue to win games, uh, they're not going to have the problem of playing teams worse than them.
We've talked about it before. If the Tennessee Titans are or leading or really close to leading in the first half or even in the third quarter, Derrick Henry being involved in the game script is always just a phenomenal thing for them. He had 19 carries, 88 total yards or 88 rushing yards and one rushing touchdown, then had a completion for a touchdown as well. Just we seem to get one of those every year, which is always fun to see. I didn't catch too much of this game, but I did see that final touchdown with I think 53 seconds left by Seattle. So Seattle, if they want to make some noise in the playoffs, they're going to have to start a little bit stronger than what they did. I'd like them to rely on Kenneth Walker a lot more than they did in the run game in not years past in this last game. We saw it against Philly. Kenneth Walker was making a lot of really big plays. It felt like they didn't go to him enough to let him make more big plays. And I think that allowed them to go down a lot earlier than they anticipated. So if they feed Kenneth Walker and get their playmakers the ball like JSN, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and just let their quarterback play point guard, that's just going to be a huge thing for them. And they can maybe make some noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Titans, another week, back-to-back weeks where they blow a late lead at home. Disappointing for them, although I guess you're tanking, so it doesn't necessarily matter. You're already out of the playoffs. And the Seahawks, with some help this week from the Rams with the Saints, they now control their own destiny. If they win out, they're in. Last week, Drew Lock led the game-winning drive. This week, Geno Smith led the game-winning drive. So the Seahawks team, they're finding ways to win games. That's what you got to do to make the playoffs. And the Titans, just disappointing season. Ryan Tannehill first start since October 15th. Couldn't really find a way to win the game. They've lost 10 straight games in the second straight season. Disappointing. Nick Folk extended his NFL record to 78 consecutive field goals made of 40 yards or closer. He's been consistent for them inside of 40. Outside of that, not so much. Nice win for the Seahawks and for the Titans. Just disappointing. You got a lot of work to do in the offseason to try to build your team around Will Levis. You're going to have to consider moving on from Derrick Henry. But they were eliminated last week, so this game doesn't mean too much to them. So a lot of guys injured and hurt, so not much to expect from them.
All right, moving on here to Commanders at Jets. This game was pretty wild. I don't have a ton to say about it. Jets dominated for most of the game. Sam Howell, another bad one early. His fall off has kind of been crazy. I know people are saying maybe he's hurt. That could be part of it. What?
Quick, too.
Yeah, quick. He fell off a complete mountain. I mean, even on Thanksgiving, he looked good. But drop off is just crazy for him. Maybe he's hurt, maybe he's not. We don't know. Jets dominated for literally almost this entire game and still almost lost. Jacoby Brissett comes back in for the second game in a row and looked good and almost brought their team back again. The Jets, though, they're winning games without Aaron Rodgers still. Even though they only have, what is it, 6 or 7 wins at this point. I don't remember exactly how many they have. I think they have 6 wins, but regardless, they're winning some games. It's good for morale. You don't want to just go and just have another horrible, one of the worst team in the league seasons, especially after you have Aaron Rodgers go down. But overall, I think the Jets are going to be good. Been saying it all season. Just gotta figure it out. Figure out a way to keep everybody on defense in the offseason. And if you could run this defense back with Aaron Rodgers, you're definitely a playoff team.
Yeah, keep the defense, get Aaron Rodgers, get some O-line help and just depth in general for just the worst case scenario, like maybe this year where they lost a couple guys for the year. But Brees Hall, he didn't care about any injuries. He had 20 carries, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground and 12 catches for 96 yards through the air. This was an Alvin Kamara type performance from what I've seen in years past. Trevor Siemian, he was Trevor Siemian. I mean, he didn't do anything too stupid to lose them this game. They were up early. Commanders made a late run, just wasn't enough. They ended up taking the lead too, I think 28-27 at one point. And then the Jets ended up hitting a field goal late. They ended up winning the game. I guess it's good for morale, show that you do have the players that can take you to the promised land. You just need the quarterback to complement them, and that quarterback is Aaron Rodgers. We'll see that later. But like you mentioned, the Sam Howell fall off, if Washington's sitting at pick like 3 or 4, do you think they take like Jaden Daniels or Drake May if he's there? I mean, I with how Sam Howell has been playing, do you want to pair someone like that with Bieniemy? I think that's definitely
Daniels
something
isn't
to think
going top
about.
five. Daniels isn't
You don't
going
think
top
he's going
five.
top 5?
No, hell no. Daniels isn't going
If
top
the
five.
right teams fall top five, I think you can go top five.
The only way I think that happens is if we have a situation like last year where it's like, okay, are we gonna have four quarterbacks in the top five?
I
But he's
personally,
he's a little
Big pro
frail, and
day.
his play. He had
pro day
big
could
pro
be
day.
huge. Right.
He's a little frail, and his play style, like I said at LSU, was just he was a good passer. When he's running, he kind of isn't looking to slide ever. He's just getting rocked. He can't play like that in the NFL. I think that alone will probably push him towards mid first round.
Me personally, I think Washington would be smart to go offensive tackle, shore up that offensive line that gave up a million sacks this year. Give Sam Howell another year in the offense, give him some protection, get Olu or Joe Alt in there just to help him out because you can a really good offensive tackle early in the first round can work wonders for an offense.
Yeah. This was surprisingly a fun game, to be honest. Jets went up big early. Jacoby Brissett comes in and somehow brought him back into the game. Sam Howell, like you said, he looked very, very bad. 6 for 22, 56 yards, two picks, 1.7 rating. That might be the worst rating I've ever seen. Jacoby Brissett comes in and looks good. They have to have some concerns about Sam Howell right now. Just doesn't look like the guy. Maybe it's just a slump. I don't know. Big game from Chris Rodriguez Jr. He had two touchdowns. Nice to see from him. Helped a guy win the $5 to 500,000 parlay. So that was crazy. For the Jets, found a way to win. Their defense played solid enough. When Jacoby came in, they didn't have an answer to Jacoby Brissett, but big game from Brees Hall. Greg Zuerlein game-winning kick. Nice to see. And we know these two teams' destiny. So good win for the Commanders or Jets.
All right, moving on here. Packers at Panthers. The Panthers almost did it. I picked the Panthers to win this game. I thought they were gonna pull off the upset. So close. To that. That would have been great. I know Bears fans were sweating a little bit there at the end. Y'all were right about Aaron Jones though. He did have a big game. First real big game since week one of the year. Quick little round of applause for him. He's now made it to two good games this season. Maybe the best Bryce Young game ever. In his professional career, of course, 300 yards, two touchdowns, no picks. Good for him. I'm rooting for him, 100% to bounce back and get a better situation next year and have this not be just a complete botch of a pick and a trade for the Panthers. The Panthers had three out of their four drives in the second half ended in touchdowns, which is huge for their offense. They dominated the Green Bay defense that has just been not good the past month or so overall. Even if the Packers do sneak in the playoffs, unless they play the Lions, which I always feel like, and the same thing with the Vikings. I think the Lions are better than the Packers. I think they're better than the Vikings. But you get a divisional rematch in the playoffs, and anything could happen. Throw the records out. Um, so I think that could be a problem for the Lions, maybe. But overall, the Packers, I don't think they're going to be able to stop anybody in the playoffs if they do make it there. They had a late game-winning field goal after almost choking this game away. But Panthers, you were right there. If the Packers or Panthers had their own pick, this would be best case scenario for them. But they don't. So it's not.
I've been saying it since Aaron Jones came back after the first injury. They need to feed him more often. Once they get him going, easily the best player on their offense, they can have a lot of success. This game, they gave it to him early. They gave it to him often. 21 carries for 127 yards. Big, big part of why they won. And unfortunately, AJ Dillon kind of stole a touchdown from him. So that sucks for you fantasy owners such as myself out there. But Jordan Love was okay. He played good enough to get a really narrow win on the road. Romeo Dobbs was the leading receiver for him, 4 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft played really well in the absence of Luke Musgrave and has been playing well in the absence of Luke in the last few weeks since he went down with injury. But on the Panthers side, like you said, Josh, this is probably Bryce Young's one of his best games of his short career to this point. He had a lot of really good completions in the fourth quarter, and two of them were really big touchdowns. One of which was that DJ Chark throw, which is just gorgeous in my opinion. I'm always a sucker for a really nice quarterback pass, and lo and behold, Bryce Young delivered. DJ Chark, like I just said, he had two touchdowns, 6 catches for 98 yards, probably one of the better games of his career as well. And Adam Thielen, this was probably his best game in the last month or so. He's been really quiet recently, and he finally got over 90 yards for the first time in a while since maybe week, I don't know, 7 or 8. So that's good for him. Like you said, Josh, if the Panthers had their pick in the first round next year, this is best case scenario. You lose close, your young quarterback gets a lot of good experience, pick up some mental notes on the way, make a couple mistakes, but those are easily fixed with better personnel around you. And yeah, I mean, but it's not the case. So thank God for that. And yeah, I hated rooting for the Packers this weekend, but it was a necessary evil in order to root for the future of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, another pretty good game from Jordan Love. He's going against a Panthers defense that has been playing very good this season. 219 yards and 2 touchdowns. He played pretty good. He's averaged 263 yards passing over the last 6 games with 13 touchdown passes and only 1 interception. Those are very good numbers. This has been a pretty promising season, actually, for him to be the starting QB of the future. If you're a Packers fan, you have to like what you're seeing from him pretty much this season. It's not just going to be Aaron Rodgers right away. There's going to be development in there. Aaron Jones becomes the first Packers player this season to exceed 100 yards rushing or receiving in a game at 127 yards on 21 carries. So Packers offense had a pretty good day. They're 7-8, 1 game behind the Seahawks and Rams. I kind of hope they don't make the playoffs because, like you said, Josh, I think they would get steamrolled. But for the Panthers, you have to like what you saw no matter what. Bryce Young, best game of his career. He looked promising. He showed some flashes finally that we've been waiting to see. Again, he was able to scramble all season, surprisingly 17 yards scrambling. But with his limited weapons, being able to have 2 receivers over 90 yards is nice to see. So good game for Bryce Young and solid win for the Packers. Just continuing to develop Jordan Love.
Yeah, the past 2.5 weeks, it's looking like Bryce Young over CJ Stroud, right? I mean, he
Okay.
significantly better
More
stats.
yards. He has had more
Yeah,
yards.
Zero passing
yeah,
yards.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. Nah, on a serious note, though, Packers do have a huge game next week with the Vikings. They're both sitting at 7-8, both competing for that last spot. But moving on here, Browns and Texans. Flacco had another amazing game. We had a little bit of Davis Mills, a little bit of Case Keenum this game. Davis Mills actually came in and played pretty well. They were already down by a lot at that point, but he did play pretty well, similar to Jacoby Brissett the past couple weeks for the Commanders. The Browns couldn't run the ball, and it just didn't matter at all. How many times in the past few years with their quarterbacks that they've had and the fact that they've had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, how many times have they not been able to run the ball and it not mattered? I don't have the stats on that, but I can't imagine it's many times. Didn't matter at all for them today on the road. Browns are already a 10-win team. They can go win up to 12 games now this season, which is just huge. If they win 12 games, give it to Stefanski. I don't care. Unless the Lions went out, then give it to Dan Campbell. But the game was only a 2-score game because of the kickoff fumble late in the game. Got the Texans a few points late. They scored a touchdown off that. But overall, Texans still got your backup quarterback in. You really need to get CJ Stroud back to make a run at this. It sucks for them because if they had Stroud, they probably wouldn't be in the situation that they're in right now. Uh, but regardless, they're in that same group of 8 and 7 teams in the AFC that some teams are going to have to lose, and that Colts game coming up in a couple of weeks is just going to be huge for them.
Yeah, by all bias aside, I think Stefanski is definitely probably one or two as of now in Coach of the Year voting. With four different starting quarterbacks, they had DTR, PJ Walker, Joe Flacco right now, and Deshaun Watson to start the year. You get a win with each of those, and you're in prime contention for the division even right now with Baltimore only being 2 games ahead. Whatever happens the next 2 weeks, Baltimore's probably going to get it, but Browns are in prime position for wild card spot. It's phenomenal. Obviously, we got to talk about the big elephant in the room. Amari Cooper, 11 catches, 265 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Arguably the best wide receiver game of the year. Easily the best wide receiver game since week 5, where DJ Moore had 230 and 3 touchdowns, and Jamar Chase had over 150, had like 15 catches and 3 touchdowns as well. No, I had to throw my boy DJ in there. But the Texans, you just got to hope CJ Stroud comes back next week. Mills and Keenum, they're not going to cut it for you. Stroud, I still think he's leading the rookie of the year race for me. I think this game is exactly why. You Too many mistakes by Keenum, and then Davis Mills. He's not the quarterback that's going to come in and just save your ass if you just don't play good enough. And they had no running game. Their receivers, they're just really hurt at the moment. Noah Brown and Nico Collins are not going to do enough with Case Keenum and Davis Mills throwing them the ball. You need that connection with CJ Stroud that they've been building all year. And obviously, Tank Dell not playing the rest of the year, it sucks as well. But Texans, they got to come in clutch the next 2 weeks if Stroud comes back. And the Browns, I'm just beyond impressed with what they've done with all the injuries they've faced this year.
Yeah, I'm beyond impressed as well. I can't remember the odds going into last week because we were looking at it talking about Coach of the Year last week. I think Stefanski was like plus 1,000 or something,
He
and now
was.
he's only plus 175 on BetMGM. So the odds have definitely went in his favorite. Dan Campbell is still the favorite now. For the Texans, Case Keenum threw for just 62 yards, 2 interceptions in his second start. Just didn't look good. They had nothing going against this elite Browns defense. Their best off play really was the Damian Pierce kick return on the camera angle that always leads to a kick return. That's something that shows that the NFL might be scripted. You never know because every time they do that camera angle where they look overhead of the field, somehow there's just always a kick return. Texans need CJ Stroud back. They got lucky last week getting that win against the Titans. You don't know how much longer you're gonna get lucky with that. They didn't have it yesterday. But on to the Browns, Amari Cooper, just a phenomenal game. Franchise record, 265 receiving yards, passing Josh Gordon's previous record of 261 yards. He also had 2 touchdowns, a 2-point conversion, and murdered a lot of people's fantasy football playoff hopes, including mine. That really hurt. Cooper has 1,250 yards this season, first receiver in team history with consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Had a lot of them yesterday. Flacco, again, continues to just be electric with this team. There's just something about him. Threw for 368 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did have 2 interceptions, but really didn't matter. It's his fourth start with the Browns, and he's by far looked like the best quarterback they've had all season. And this team being 10-5 is just, it's so impressive. They're pretty much guaranteed almost at this point one more win on Thursday, I think against the Jets, and they will have their second postseason appearance since 2002. So Flacco continues to be great. That's not a team you want to see right now in the playoffs.
Yeah. As far as coach of the year, you mentioned it, Mike. The odds do vary as far as sportsbook. For DraftKings, it's Dan Campbell 1 plus 175, Stefanski 2 at plus 200. MGM, I'm seeing plus 175 for the both of them. Uh, FanDuel plus 150 for Stefanski, plus 230 for Dan Campbell. So he's a significantly higher favorite on there. And then Caesars, Stefanski is plus 130, which is the best odds of any platform for coach of the year right now, over Dan Campbell, who's plus 225 there. So that tells me Vegas doesn't know what's going to happen, which is always good because it feels like they do with these awards most of the time. They're completely lost. So I think a bet on either of those guys right now at this point in week 17 is just great value to take either of those. But moving on here to the first 3 o'clock game, Jags and Bucks. Trevor Lawrence played poorly and then got hurt again. So that's a significant problem for the Jags. We talked about with Sam Howell how much of a drop off he's had. The Jags defense has had a significant drop
I
off.
knew it was coming. I
Yeah,
knew it
it
was
was a
coming.
matter. I mean, they were playing. That happens sometimes with units that play above their skill level, above what everyone thought. Sometimes that drop off happens. I mean, we see it a lot when a backup quarterback comes in. Tommy DeVito, has had it happen. Can't stop saying Danny DeVito. That's my guy. But regardless, you see it happen a lot with massive drop offs. We've seen it happen with the Jags here. They've been just poor over the past month or so, month plus. Another mistake-free game for Baker. Didn't throw any picks. He was great. He's been on an upward trajectory in the past month or so. He's been phenomenal. Rashad White had his first dud game in weeks. He wasn't great at all. It didn't really matter for the Bucks. They were up a lot for most of this game. Jags, on the other hand, you lose your quarterback, of course. Trevor Lawrence didn't play well when he was playing, though. 4 turnovers for the game for the Jags. Just hard to win in that situation. And the Jags have kind of just been trending downward since that original injury from Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I know I said it for sure, but I think you mentioned it a little bit too. Back in week, or you, Josh, back in week like 5 or 6, that the Baker Mayfield dream or the Baker Mayfield run was over, and we should just give up on it. I think he's playing the best football of his career in the last 3, 4 weeks. He's been
Arguable.
phenomenal, and he's been just on a tear, and especially the last 2 weeks, 6 total touchdowns, no interceptions. He's been phenomenal. The Bucks have a real shot at winning this South and making it not look like an absolute just poverty divisional champion this year. If Baker can play like this in the wild card round, and Philly somehow makes it down to that 5 seed, who knows? Like Philly's pass defense, they've been a little shaky the last I don't know 2 months. I mean, if they're not entirely healthy and the Bucks are coming in, Chris Godwin's on his 10 catch 100 yards in a game shit. Mike Evans is mossing people. I mean, maybe we see a crazy upset in the NFC champs from last year go down in the wild card round. But on the other side, Jacksonville, yeah, it sucks to see Trevor Lawrence go down with yet another injury. And for Bears fans, that really sucks because you got Jags Panthers next week and Bryce Young against CJ Beathard. I mean, that's not a juicy matchup at all if you're hoping for the Bears to land the number one overall pick. I think the Panthers are still only one loss away from basically securing the final the first pick in the draft for the Chicago Bears. But regardless, I'm gonna be sweating either way, and I'm the biggest Jacksonville Jaguars fan in the world next week.
I'm the biggest Panthers fan in the world next week, but just an
So am
abysmal
I.
day from yeah, bad day from Trevor Lawrence. And on, to top it off, he picks up another injury. 3 weeks in a row, he's picked up an injury. First, it was the ankle. Last week, it was the concussion, and then somehow he passes concussion protocol. And now this week, it's a shoulder injury, and I do expect this one will probably keep him out for a game. They did sign a player to their active roster, a quarterback. And if the Jags, it seems like they didn't learn anything from the Colts with Andrew Luck at this point. I'm not comparing these two players at all because I think Andrew Luck is a much better quarterback, but continue to play Trevor Lawrence through all these injuries and just force him out there on the field. Whether it's him forcing himself out there, I don't know, but you had to give him a week off somewhere in any of these games, I think, to just let him rest his body a little bit. He's been taking a lot of hits, especially recently, and these injuries are going to pile up and hurt, not only hurt him now, but hurt him later in his career. Um, Another just disappointing player besides the defense, which has been disappointing recently, is Travis Etienne. Just supposed to have such a great year. Everyone slanders Najee Harris, calls him a bust, but yeah, I think he currently has more yards than Travis Etienne on the season. So he just hasn't been great, hasn't been the running back you really expected him to be, whether it's them not getting him balls in the correct situation. Pause. But this Jags team has been rough. And the Buccaneers are one of my favorite stories on this season. They've just they really had no expectations going into the season. I didn't really have any expectations. You saw the videos in training camp of Baker and Kyle Trask throwing the passes and just missing the receivers. Just didn't look like they were going to have anything this season. And they've come out and they've been maybe the surprise of the season. Mike Evans just continues to dominate in this contract season. He should stay in Tampa hopefully his whole career. He's going to go down as one of the best receivers of this generation and somehow continues to fly under the radar. He has just been incredible. Like you said, Josh Rashad didn't have a great game, but still found a way to get away with a touchdown. And Baker Mayfield, he's just been so good this season. And we've talked about Coach of the Year. I think we got to talk a little bit about Comeback Player of the Year. I think DeMar Hamlin's still the heavy favorite. I just don't see it, man. Baker Mayfield, he's been so
Shouldn't
rough
be.
in his career, and coming back, he's been incredible. Joe Flacco has come back from retirement from sitting on the couch and has been incredible. I think it should be a two-race contest between Flacco and Mayfield, but yeah.
Yeah, I will. I know I came on last episode and laid out the plan for everybody on how the Bears lose the number one pick. There will be an updated plan on Thursday's episode. Because with Trevor Lawrence
Got to get a
possibly not
lot of
playing,
revisions in there.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't even really need that many revisions. Trevor Lawrence getting hurt just saved it. If Trevor Lawrence didn't, if he plays, I mean, I don't think they're going to do it, but if he doesn't play, they for sure have a shot. For sure. But moving on here, Cardinals and Bears. The Bears flirted with choking this game. They decided not to. Good for them. Fields had a tough game in the air, but he ran it very well. He had 97 rushing yards. He was pretty good on the ground for them. Cole Kmet, he's had a pretty good season overall. Another good game for him here. Cardinals somehow lose this game without turning the ball over. It's pretty hard to do in this league, especially losing by double digits without turning the ball over. And they still managed to do that somehow. Another flop game for DJ Moore. You brought up my take earlier, Zach, about Baker Mayfield earlier in the season. I'm gonna come right back at you with the DJ Moore top 5 season take. He's not top 10 in yards, receptions, or touchdowns, despite playing every single game. So that's I mean, I'm not very good at math, but if he's not top 10 in anything this season, how could he possibly have a top 5 season? I guess maybe if we're going off vibes, but regardless, he was poor. Bears get a win over a bad team. They could have choked and they didn't.
Well, I'll start with this. DJ Moore he has been playing hurt the last couple weeks, and he got hurt on the first catch of the game, or his first catch of the game. So he was not at 100% the last couple weeks, and definitely
No
this
one's at
week.
100%. It's week 16. No one's at 100%.
I don't know, man. But regardless, he's going through some stuff, especially at the quarterback position. Speaking of the quarterback position, Justin Fields, like you
Now
said,
it's
through
on
the air,
Fields.
through the air, he's been this game, he was all right. He had two, maybe three really bad plays, one of which was his interception. I feel like the decision was kind of right, but he just didn't get the accuracy on it. I feel like there was a small window in the corner of that end zone where he could have put it where Herbert could get the 2 feet in, but I don't know why you have a running back taking that route anyways, but regardless, I think he was phenomenal as a rusher. There was the involving interception. The sequence was he got a 39-yard crazy run. He high step, looked back at the defenders after he made them both miss, took it for another 20-ish, and then the very next play threw that pick. That's been a very large sum up of what Justin Fields has been for the Bears. Spectacular with the legs, but inconsistent with the arms.
Same thing
Uh,
happened in Detroit. Same exact thing. He
I mean,
celebrated and then it bit him in the ass as quick as it can.
honestly, the game in Detroit, they didn't lose because of him, and they won this game. So I don't really think anything's biting him in the ass this week.
He had a chance
But
to win that.
I don't know. I mean, you talk to Tyler Scott. He said on record, yeah, I could have ran the route better, and it missed by like an inch.
Of course, he's
So
not
you
going to
run that
blame his
route better.
quarterback. He's not going to be like, yeah, Fields missed me.
Regardless,
He's not gonna say
regardless,
that.
regardless if you see the play, Tyler
I
Scott
agree.
messed up
I
and he
agree.
admitted
But
to it. Regardless, Fields, I've been rooting for him since day one. Whatever polls decides, I'm good with because if you take a quarterback at one, probably Caleb. Um, you get a fresh contract reset, all that. And then if you stick with Fields, you get to trade back from one, maybe one or two spots, take Marvin Harrison Jr., or you trade back into like the 8 to 12 range and stockpile a bunch of picks, maybe another player of the DJ Moore caliber to add to the mix and just really stockpile talent. But regardless of what happens, I'm good with it. Bears are in a great spot in the future. Not often do you come across having the number one overall pick in back-to-back years, and one of which you not even being the worst team in the league. It's kind of crazy. But on the other side of the ball, the Bears defense has been balling the last few weeks. Adding Montez Sweat, I'll say it. I said it once, I said it again. He's been phenomenal. He was in the backfield a bunch. Kyler Gordon from the slot even beat a double team of I think it was an offensive tackle and then a guard, and he somehow got in for a sack. So got a feel for Kyler there. They just got to build the rest of that team up. Maybe they look to go O-line as well with their pick, but I think Marvin Harrison's the right pick for them if they finish top three. But yeah, the Bears have a lot to look forward to. The Cardinals, they do as well. They're gonna have a top three, top four pick in the draft. The Bears, they're probably gonna have a top one pick in the draft. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, Bears get a win over an iffy team. And I guess the Bears are mathematically still alive, but probably not gonna happen for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Chicago scored touchdowns on 3 straight possessions in the first half, went up 21-0. Everything was looking pretty good at that point. Khalil Herbert, season high, 112 yards and a touchdown. So nice game from him. 420 yards total on offense, 250 yards rushing after only 88 last week against Cleveland. So nice little bounce back game from the Bears going against a Cardinals defense that has been all right at some points in the season. For the Cardinals, Kyler Murray played okay, 230 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. It's only a 6 game back from the ACL. This team desperately needs some help at the receivers. They've been missing Marquise Brown. Greg Dortch had a couple big plays. He had that nice touchdown late in the game when it looked like maybe they were going to find a way to come back. I'd really hoped Rondell Moore would become something bigger in this offense these last couple seasons. Sadly, it hasn't really happened. And this is the team that I look at as this should be Marvin Harrison Jr.'s home in this draft. Him going to Kyler Murray, I think this offense would be absolutely, maybe not absolutely electric, but I think it'd be very fun to watch with him there. And as far as the Bears tweet or the Bears draft, I don't know if you guys saw the Caleb Williams liked tweet where he liked a tweet saying that the Bears should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 1 and pass on him. So
I don't know if
Caleb
you
Williams
saw a
doesn't want to be in
recent like
Chicago.
tweet where he said where I don't even have the exact quote, but the guy he liked the tweet saying that I've been waiting for all my life for Caleb Williams for a quarterback like Caleb Williams to come to Chicago, and he liked that tweet as well, and that's more recent, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, he saw all the slander. That's why.
Yeah, it's called PR,
I think
brother.
it's just he's just keeping
PR.
receipts.
PR. Yeah, that's it was something I tweeted out earlier at the beginning of the season. I said, which of these scenarios is funnier? The Bears drafting Caleb Williams and he ends up not being nearly the prospect everybody thinks he is, or the Bears trying to get him and he says no. I think both those options, I'm still pretty torn on which one of those is funnier, but
Objectively, they would be so funny strictly because of Chicago's quarterback history.
yeah, And I guess him being a bust looked farther out than I guess it does now, even though I still don't think there's any chance he becomes a bust. But um regardless, moving on here. Cowboys at Dolphins. The Cowboys have now lost two straight games. They got blown out last week in Buffalo. They lose a close one here in Miami. Dak played well, but the Cowboys just couldn't run the ball at all. They're a significantly better team when they can get Pollard involved and run the ball a ton. They couldn't do that here. They had to sit back and pass for much of this game because they just had no effectiveness in the run game. Uh, three total touchdowns in this game. It was basically a field goal battle. Outside of that, the Dolphins, they won the turnover battle 1-0, which was enough for them to win this game overall in a close game. That was really the difference. Uh, Credit to Dak and the Cowboys, though. They came down late, down points, and they had a huge touchdown drive late to take the lead. The problem was they just left too much time on the clock for the Dolphins. This Dolphins offense is too good to not be able to at least get in field goal range. They did more than that. They made it a chip shot for Sanders, and they won the game on a pretty easy field goal to win it at the end. But big win for the Dolphins. Their problem all year long is people say, "Oh, they can't win a big game. They can't win a big game." They came out here, they won a big game. Didn't just beat up on bad teams like they've been doing all season. Huge win for them. Cowboys. Now it's with the Eagles playing the Commander or not the Commanders who they play. Cardinals next week and the Giants week 18. It's looking pretty unlikely that the Cowboys do pass them up and end up winning that division. So maybe if you're on the Cowboys coaching staff, you maybe just start watching some Tampa Bay tape.
Yeah, this game was definitely really interesting. My MVP of the game was definitely Jason Sanders. He had three 50-plus yard field goals, 32-yard field goal, and then obviously that 29-yard field goal at the end to win it. You saw him counting it off on his hand to five after he made it, getting praised by his teammates. I always love when the kickers get a lot of love. Tyreek Hill, and I think this was his first game back after that injury. 9 catches for 99 yards. He was pretty good. Nothing super spectacular, but he's always got that gravity effect to him that not a lot of receivers do have. Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, not too effective on the ground, but they didn't need to be. Tua was solid through the air against a really, really intense secondary and defensive unit in general, led by Dan Quinn, who, according to you, Josh, is a superstar. And I completely agree. The Cowboys, on the other hand, on the offense, Dak Prescott, he was all right. Tony Pollard left a lot out there. And CeeDee Lamb, of course, phenomenal as per usual. Top three receiver on the year, in my opinion. 6 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. He's been great all year, and he showed up in the big moments when it really mattered. Unfortunately, just left too much time on the clock, like you said. And yeah, I mean, Jason Sanders, can't say it enough. He was phenomenal. He was fun to watch this game. So
Yeah, Dolphins finally beat a team above 500. Good for them. Raheem Mostert, NFL leading 21st touchdown on the season. Good for him. Sadly, for the Dolphins, Jalen Waddle did pick up a couple injuries. He was out for a little bit with an eye injury, came back. I think he has an ankle injury that they are going to have to monitor, so that's not good for them. Tua, he played all right. 293 passing yards, no turnovers. That's what you want to do. Got the ball to Tyreek Hill, 9 catches for 99 yards. They did enough to win this game. It wasn't the electric offense we had seen all season, but a win is a win. And the Cowboys, Dak was okay. He got the ball to CD. He had a good game, 6 catches, 118 yards, had the big score in the fourth quarter. They didn't decide to didn't shadow him with Jalen Ramsey all game. So that was an interesting tactic by Fangio, but the defense still played pretty solid. For the Cowboys, my main takeaway is you touched on it with Tony Pollard, Josh. I think they might have to move on from him this season. Just hasn't really had the season that you expected with the Cowboys run game. He had 12 carries for 38 yards in this game. He had that bad play where he maybe could have just went to the outside and ran into the end zone and so he decided to cut up, got tackled at the 1, and then I think they ended up fumbling on that possession and scored 0 points on the 1 yard line. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the running back position. They haven't played Deuce Vaughn really at all this season. I don't think he's going to be an option for the future, but there's a couple players in the draft or maybe in free agency, maybe a Zach Moss, I don't know, but big win for the Dolphins finally getting a first win against a team above 500.
Yep. Moving on here to Sunday Night Football, Patriots beating the Broncos. Bailey Zappi has been better than Mac Jones overall when you let him play in a 0-0 game, not a 40-0 game. Bill Belichick was just putting him in at the end of games when Mac Jones was sucking. The times where he started, Zappi's actually been pretty solid. I mean, we saw it in the Steelers game, we saw it in this game here. Two road primetime games, and he played pretty good in both of them. Neither team ran the ball well this game at all. This game, honestly, like it's hard to say. I hate to blame any game on just a few plays because you go and you play a game where there's 150 plays or whatever. It's hard to go and be like, oh, these couple plays are the reason we lost. But you look at the Broncos giving up 2 touchdowns in 6 seconds. They gave up a touchdown to the Patriots offense, and then on the kickoff, you lose the ball. Patriots walk it in the end zone. You get 2 touchdowns in 6 seconds. You go from down 9-7 to down 23-7, and that's a hole it's hard to dig out of. The Broncos did score 2 touchdowns late, trying to dig out of that aforementioned hole that they were in, and they just couldn't do it. The Broncos are really starting to fall apart. It was looking like they were going to make a playoff push after starting so poorly this season. Now they're back to 7-8. Uh, Kind of not completely, but semi reminiscent of the Lions last year. Their horrible start. They battle back. It's looking that they're going to make the playoffs. Then they lose that tough road game to the Panthers, a team that they should have beat. Uh, I mean, the Broncos should not have beaten the Lions last week, but they definitely should have won this week at home against the Patriots. They couldn't do it, and it's looking like that magical run is probably coming to an end with all the 8-7 teams.
Yeah, like you said, Broncos, they got to have this game, especially against a subpar opponent. Patriots, this was a game they didn't need to win. They might have knocked themselves out of Drake May range. And I said it kind of jokingly last week. Patriots are going to win out and kind of ruin your little scheme for the Bears to not finish with the first overall pick. Maybe I'm speaking something into existence here. I don't know. But Bailey Zappi, he was all right. I think he's going to be a good backup quarterback for whoever they bring in next year. Mac Jones should be gone. Zeke didn't get much going on the ground, but again, a lot of running backs with a lot of catches this week. Ezekiel Elliott had 9 catches for 33 yards on a score. Uh, like I said before, they had no run game, so surprisingly that they won it. But like you said, a little bit of luck involved with the what was it, 2 touchdowns in 6 seconds, I think it was. But regardless, the Patriots they came away with one that they shouldn't have, and the Broncos that might have just killed their season.
Yeah, one of the first teams in the cluster of teams in the AFC to kind of just be eliminated at this point. Their playoff hopes pretty much shattered. They had that nice stretch of games, but they have lost most of the mojo. You cannot lose to the Patriots when you're fighting for the playoffs, especially in the season when the Patriots have just been so poor. Bill Belichick, great game coaching again. He was yelling at the refs again. A lot of people said he didn't care anymore this season, but you could tell in that game he wanted to win it again. Screaming at the refs. Solid game from Zeke again. Not great running the football, but did have 9 catches in the passing game, had a receiving touchdown. And Chad Ryland, I think they used like a 4th round pick or something on him as a kicker. He's been pretty bad this season. He had the nuclear doink in this game where it sounded like a bomb went off, but somehow after all that, he had missed 2 kicks in the game, but came out and kicked a game-winning 56-yard field goal. So good for the Patriots now. I hope they keep winning, get themselves out of this top quarterbacks, and we can see them suffer for years to come.
Yeah, this is completely off topic, but as I'm watching one of these random bowl games here in the background, I see in the bottom right, it's advertising the Lions Cowboys ESPN Saturday night game. And for some reason, they are titling it a Monday Night Football Special Edition game. ESPN, just because you have Monday Night Football doesn't mean that every game you don't have on Monday is Monday Night Football Special Edition. Like that just makes no sense.
I think it's
Monday
pretty
Night,
special.
yeah, Monday Night Football Special Edition on a Saturday, I guess. But regardless, hope the Lions can get that win in Monday Night Football next Saturday. But regardless, moving on here to the Christmas Day games, and Christmas night game, I guess. Raiders at Chiefs. The Raiders won this game with no completed passes after the first quarter, which is just an insane stat. It's hard. It's very hard to win a game like that. They managed to. Zamir White is a big reason for that. He was just huge on the ground all game for the Raiders. Uh, Back to back. This is another game very similar to the last game we just spoke about, how a couple plays completely changed the game. I mean, this one, you have a back to back scoop and score and then a pick six for the Raiders in the first half. And that was the story of the game. You got those 14 points and they were basically in the driver's seat after that. Mahomes and this Chiefs offense has been pretty bad as of late. And they've only been maybe decent, I would say, for the full season. They've been pretty bad recently. I mean, I'm going to keep coming on here and saying it. I've been saying it the past month or so. As bad as they look, I still think they're going to figure it out. And I still think they're going to probably come out the AFC. But it's rough right now. I will say, though, I will for sure be taking the Chiefs to win the AFC. It's going to be the best odds we've had in the Mahomes era, probably. for them to win the AFC, and you might as well sprinkle them winning the Super Bowl too. You're not going to probably get odds like this for a long time with the Chiefs. This defense is so good. You just have to figure it out in the playoffs with this offense, and it's hard to believe that they don't. We've seen it before. Andy Reid holding something back in the regular season, give it to you in the playoffs. You got to imagine we see something like that.
I will say, this is very what is it, 2019, 2020 Bears-esque win for the Raiders. And ironically, Matt Nagy was on the other sideline for this one. They ended up getting 2 defensive touchdowns which were the difference makers in this one. Mahomes, him and Kelsey just seem out of touch. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm kind of on the opposite side of you, Josh. I don't think this Chiefs team is going to figure it out. I think they might run into a really hot wild card team if they end up winning the AFC West. And from what it looks like, they probably will because the Broncos dropped a crucial one this week. So I think the Chiefs are going to drop a really large stinker in the wild card round and lose to maybe a hot Bills team or I don't even know, just someone else who just somehow sneaks in. Maybe Cleveland if they sneak in as the 5 seed and Kansas City drops to the 4 seed.
That's
I
their two
if
likely
they
opponents
don't
right there. It's Cleveland and the
Right, but
Bills.
I mean, it's a close matchup. If I'm the Chiefs, I'm a little worried if I run into Buffalo or Cleveland because you just aren't playing good football right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like you said, Mahomes and Reed are holding something back for the playoffs. They just turn it on once the postseason hits. But outside of the Super Bowls, Mahomes has never won a road playoff game, and if they make it past the wild card round, it's going to be all on the road from then until the Super Bowl. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough road ahead for Kansas City, but honestly, I got my money on Baltimore after what we saw last night.
Yeah, I don't think Mahomes has ever played in a road playoff game to even begin with. But for the Raiders, a couple weeks ago, I said I thought maybe the Antonio Pierce era was coming to an end where the players were starting, they were losing games. They didn't look very good, but 2 weeks in a row now where this team has come out on fire and looked great. AP said before the game, by any means necessary. And that's what they did. They didn't have to pass the ball. I think they were the first team to ever win without passing the ball after the first quarter since like 2000 or something. Um, 2 defensive touchdowns. Bilal Nichols, MVP. Congrats to him. Jack Jones, pick six. 7 seconds later, and Zamir White dominating the game on the offensive side of the ball. Very surprised by this Raiders team. They came out and just dominated. Chiefs have lost 3 of their last 4. Just a dominant game from the Raiders in this one. I didn't expect it, but the Nickelodeon game, they came out and they were the Grinch. Jack Jones after the pick six, fake giving the ball to the fan. You love to
As a
see. I
little
love to see that.
kid.
I love to see that in
That's not
football,
what
though.
happened. Did you guys see like actually watch the clip? There's a grown man behind the kid trying to steal it from him, so he
I
pulled
don't
it back
care.
from the kid. I
I
mean,
don't
Okay.
care.
I'm
I
with him
love
on
this.
that. You can't let a grown man steal the ball from a
No,
kid like that.
you
Yeah,
can't.
I feel
But
that.
I love this. Even if I just like the image of the kid.
It is
I
funny.
Getting
like
the
the
ball
Grinch
stolen
narrative,
from him.
yeah.
It
I
is funny.
Division rivalry got to come back like that. You got to hate your
Yeah,
division rivals.
I agree.
Um, and speaking on Zach talking about the Bills possible rematch, if that game happens, if I were a Chiefs fan, I'd be petrified. I think a Chiefs
Well,
versus
I
Bills
the
game
exact opposite take.
in the Chiefs versus Bills game, I think the Bills come in and they get their revenge from a couple years ago. I just think they do. I think the Chiefs win against any other team. I think the Chiefs would probably beat the Browns in my opinion, but I think the Bills coming in. I think the Bills beat.
It's interesting because I was about to when you were done before you said that. I was gonna say if I'm a Chiefs fan, I am terrified of that Browns matchup, and I'm begging for the Bills matchup. I'll say it now. I'll call my
I
shot.
wouldn't want either of them.
The Bills are not beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead twice. They're not doing it. Not in one season. We've seen them choke in the playoffs before. I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you'd much rather play the Bills than the Browns. The Bills defense is a lot worse than the Browns defense. You struggle to score against a lot of teams right now. I think you'd rather play the shittier defense and hope that your offense can come through.
I mean, ever
Oh
since
no.
the Sean McDermott news came out, the Bills team as a whole has been very good. So
Yeah, I mean they
you
showed
know
some
what?
tough flashes this week.
I might take it back. I think the Chiefs lose in the first round if they play the Browns or the Bills. They have to
That's
hope
what
somehow the
I'm thinking
AFC
the
South
same
team gets
thing.
in.
All right, that's an interesting take. I don't know. I just believe in the Chiefs. I just find a hard time believing after everything.
I
If
feel you.
that ha-
It's hard to go against it.
Mahomes looked like just a diva these last couple weeks. He hasn't. I don't know.
I
Screaming to
wouldn't say
call the fucking
I
plays or
wouldn't.
whatever.
I'm back and forth. He
He
has been a
looks out
diva
of
for
it.
sure.
He looks
Yeah, I don't
out of
know.
it. he
I'm
looks like
back and
he's
forth
scared.
on them.
Rashid Rice has
Yeah,
been great for them, but
he
he
has
just
been.
looks like
They
he's
just need
scared.
one more. They just need one more guy, and Kelsey's getting old and stuff. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about the Chiefs over the next few weeks. So moving on here. Giants at Eagles. Giants went down big early in this game. Uh Tommy DeVito gets benched for Tyrod Taylor, who ended up being pretty good. It was kind of the week of the quarterback getting benched. Other one comes in and plays well. I mean, we had Davis Mills, Tyrod Taylor, and of course Jacoby Brissett. They almost come back in this game too. Saquon had a pretty solid game overall, nothing crazy for him. This is a better game for the Eagles offense. They've been pretty mid recently overall. But they had a much better game today. They were moving the ball a lot better. They put up a lot more points than they've been putting up. The Eagles were dominating this game, but just dumb turnovers led to an almost choke of this game. If you're gonna throw picks and fumble when you're up by a lot, no team in the NFL for the most part is just gonna mail it in if you're gonna give them the ball back. So if you're going to give them the ball back, they're going to try to score points and they're going to try to come back in this game. That happened for the Giants. They had a real chance to win this game. They did not, though. The Eagles hold on. This is a huge win for them with the Cowboys losing. Like we mentioned, like I went into detail in the Lions segment. They are now tied with the Niners and the Lions at 11-4. We're talking about the Niners here in just a few minutes, but yeah, you're now at you're number one in your division with no tiebreaker. You're number one, and you are tied with the Lions and uh, the 49ers, of course. For the Eagles, though, they need the Lions to lose one of the next couple games because if they win out, they do not control their own destiny for the 2 seed. If them and the Lions both win out, like I said, the Eagles would drop to the 3 seed, which they don't want to do at this point in the season. They control their own destiny. As crazy as it may sound, they're probably rooting for the Cowboys next week. But we'll see. Regardless, Eagles didn't choke this one away.
Yeah, the Eagles pretty much had full control of the game in the first half, and it even ended with a delay of game on the defense. I believe it was I don't know who it was. I think it might have been Bobby Okereke, who uh I don't remember what happened. I think it was he thought he got a fumble and then he fell on it and he held the ball with like 4 seconds left. It was gonna run out the clock, but because of the flag, it stopped the clock and allowed the Eagles to go out and get a field goal to put themselves up, I believe, 17 at the half, which could have turned into something really crazy at the end of the game if things fell the Giants' way. But it didn't happen. But the Giants battled back, like you mentioned, a couple costly turnovers, really just mistakes in general, special teams error, and then stumbling on a route which allowed for the Adoree Jackson pick six to bring the Giants within a possession. Eagles ended up just securing it after that, and DeAndre Swift was the main reason for that. He ended up having like what felt like a million yards on that final drive. The Giants just could not stop him. I'm a firm believer of if you get your run game going, it makes your quarterback's life so much easier. Once the Eagles got into that pistol set and DeAndre Swift and Jalen Hurts were just going read option, RPO, or just inside zone run, Giants couldn't stop it, and it felt very easy for the Eagles to move the ball. Props to DeAndre Swift, who has been relatively quiet the last few weeks, partially because of the quality of the opponents, but also because of just game script not really going his way. The Eagles going down pretty early, or just being in shootouts against good teams. But if the Eagles want to have some playoff success, they're going to have to feed Swift, Gainwell, maybe even a little bit of Boston Scott, have a lot of success on the ground to let Jalen Hurts really thrive through play action and RPO action.
Yeah, if they want to be successful in the playoffs, they obviously have to get that run game. That's really their key for everything. They still have the tush push though. Jalen Hurts, NFL record most touchdowns by a quarterback rushing in a single season, 15 now. He has a total of 39 yards across all 15 of his rushing touchdowns this season. That's an average of 2.6 yards per touchdown. Mickey Mouse record, but Cam Newton had more yards on his record-breaking 14th rushing touchdown as a quarterback than Jalen Hurts had in all of them. So the tush push has been a hack for this Eagles offense. For the Giants, it looks like Tommy DeVito's insanity run is finally over. Tyrod Taylor came in and looked okay. DeVito hadn't really been the same since the maybe concussion in the Saints game. I don't know, but second straight division title is clear for the Eagles. Just got to win out. You got Arizona and the Giants to finish off the season, so you should probably win out. If you don't, then you have even bigger problems going into the playoffs than just a division title. But nice win for the Eagles. They were able to just get the run game going, like you guys said, and they need to do that.
All right, moving on here to actually hold on. Before I move on, I do want to say, um, even though the Eagles are probably going to finish with a better seed than the Cowboys here, I definitely would be way more scared of the Cowboys in the playoffs. And I think that is very beneficial to those middle, not the one seed teams. Because, I mean, let's say you're the Niners, right? You get the one seed, you get the bye. The Eagles beat whoever they play, the Lions beat whoever they play, the Cowboys beat whoever they play. Now you're playing the Cowboys in the divisional round. You're going to be the 1 and the 5. Then you get the Lions and the Eagles to duke it out. If I'm the Lions or the Eagles, I would much rather play each other than have to play either the Niners or the Cowboys. So I think if it ends up being like that and the Cowboys are sitting at the 5, I think it's almost, I mean, I don't want to say it's more valuable because you can't take a win for granted and the number one seed is so important. But I don't know, avoiding the Cowboys might be bigger than getting a bye at this point. Who knows what it is, but I think that's something to look into when you have a arguably maybe the second best team in the conference is going to be the 5 seed.
Yeah,
I think that's
I agree.
scary. But regardless, the Niners will probably just still beat the brakes off them again. But speaking of the Niners, they got the brakes beaten off them last night. The 49ers lose their first game healthy. I know Trent Williams got hurt late, but overall, this was their first game that they lost healthy. Early in the game, we got to talk about it. Lamar tripping over the ref and getting the safety. The refs literally gave the Niners 2 points, but that didn't make even close to a difference in this game. Thank God. If this would have been the Ravens losing by 1 point or 2 points, it would be really hard to not look at that and be like, that changed the entire game. But Purdy was pretty bad. He threw 4 picks. Not all of them were his fault. I'm trying to remember like exactly which one was what. The one that got deflected, that
That
one
was the
was
second one.
yeah,
Wait, no,
that
second
one.
That was
and
the third
third were
one.
both
Yeah,
second and third were both
The one that
deflected.
was a screen to Debo that got deflected. It's
That
50
was
the
the
50
second
second
on
one, I
that.
one.
think.
That was the
That
second
that
one.
one's 50-50 for me on being his fault. The the one where Kyle Hamilton got shoved into the ground and then somehow got back up and made the
That was
tip
the third
play.
That's
one.
just all hustle. All
That's what I'm
hustle.
saying. It's hard for me to look at this because most of these picks, I'm trying to remember if it was the fourth one or the first one that was definitely his fault.
The first
I
one was
can't
definitely
remember.
his fault. That was just
First
Kyle
one.
Hamilton
First one
motion.
easily
Okay,
was
okay, yeah,
did
yeah.
not see Kyle Hamilton coming from the right, and he just
That's what it was. Yes, that one was
demolished it.
his fault. The two that were tipped, I think you can go either way on those. Maybe they're his fault, maybe they're not. At the end of the day, the Ravens defense just fucking made plays. Whether you can be like, oh, I mean, yeah, it was a bad Brock Purdy game. He was one of the worst quarterbacks of the entire week. The Niners were moving this ball the entire game on the Ravens. They just couldn't score at all. And right when it looked like they were getting in a rhythm, you had a big George Kittle pass or you had a big Christian McCaffrey run. That's when the Ravens defense just came out of nowhere and made plays. And that's just what won them this game. I was very critical. Honestly, I think I might be what you want me to come on here and shit on your team. I mean, I shit on the Cowboys offense early. They've been like the best offense in the league basically since then. I come on here last week, talk about how I think the Ravens are probably frauds, and they go and they beat the brakes off the team that I said was the best team in football.
Please talk about how bad
So,
the Bears are, please.
yeah, I mean,
Won't
I
matter.
do talk about them. The Bears are too bad for that jinx to ever work. But regardless, if your team is good and I shit on your team, they're probably gonna end up being better. Regardless, Niners, tough loss for them. Eagles and the Lions are very, very happy with this one to tie that up at the top of the NFC. Like I just spoke about a few minutes ago. Christian McCaffrey was still Christian McCaffrey, still had a good game. You're not going to stop him from having a good game, but we now know it's okay if he has a good game. You can still beat the Niners team. They're beatable. You just have to make plays and force turnovers. That's just how you have to beat them. Like I said, the Niners offense wasn't horrible outside of just the plays that they made and on the Ravens defensive plays that they made and a couple bad Brock Purdy throws overall. The Ravens proved that it just doesn't matter if you give up a ton of yards and you get shredded. I mean, there were times, especially early on in this game, the first couple of drives for the Niners were like, oh my God, they're getting everything. A couple of giant George Kittle plays. Christian McCaffrey, like I said, was going crazy, of course. And it was like, okay, are they about to just run up and down the field with the Ravens here? And right when it looked like they were going to do good, they have a crazy play where Kyle Hamilton makes an insane play or Marlon Humphrey gets a tip. That was the other one, right? It was like the sack and it got tipped up. Shit. And it got tipped up and then Marlon Humphrey picked it. I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember
The
exactly.
I think
first one
so.
There were
was
so
Hamilton.
many.
The second one was the screen pass that was shot straight into the air, and then I think
Yep.
Humphrey got it. And then the third one was Humphrey was in coverage on Kittle, went off the shoulder pad up. Hamilton, after being pancaked illegally, was in the right place at the right time. And then the last one was, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was just crowded pocket going down, tried throwing it. Patrick Queen
That
picked it, and then he
oh,
took
the
it
Patrick
like
Queen
30
one,
something
right?
yards down
Right.
to like the 10 or something.
And then one of them that there was like a unnecessary roughness or something or no, the Kyle Hamilton one where he was down and got back up and picked it.
Right,
He also had the 15-yard penalty that I didn't
right.
know they were going to give them that after the kick. For some reason I thought it was just going to get declined and that would be it. But 15 extra yards, I mean, that was crucial. That was one of the biggest plays of the game right there. But overall, I don't know with 4 picks how you remember every single one like that. It's pretty crazy. But
Appreciate
regardless,
it.
that's all all I gotta say about this one. The Niners just went out. You beat the Cardinals, you beat the Rams, two teams, or is it the Cardinals? Who do they play next week? It's not the Cardinals.
Cardinals and Eagles, I thought
No,
you
it's
said earlier.
yeah, it's Commanders Rams is the
Oh,
last
okay.
two for them. So don't
Gotcha.
lose a game you shouldn't lose against the Commanders next week. Chase Young revenge game. They're not gonna lose that game. Yeah, we're talking though, Rams week 18. The Rams could need that game more than the Niners do, honestly. I don't think it would be crazy to see the Niners win that game. I mean, two of the best coaches we've seen go head to head. We've seen both get the best out of one another. Um, in the game that mattered the absolute most, though, which coach won that game? That's all I gotta say.
Well, for me, I've got a lot of things I want to say about this game. I hope I can keep them straight in my head. I don't have them written down or anything, so that's probably on me. So hopefully I remember everything. First off, prior to this game, I had San Francisco as my NFC championship winner. Probably my Super Bowl pick, just because they had zero games where they looked awful on both sides of the ball. And of course, they just go out and look horrendous on offense in the red zone. They couldn't finish drives. A couple unlucky interceptions, but a couple that really you just kind of want to have back if you're Brock Purdy. And the defense, they just couldn't contain Lamar. He looked superhuman out there. He was phenomenal. Next point. Oh, geez, now I'm already forgetting. Oh, it felt like the first half was kind of a series of missed opportunities for Baltimore, and San Francisco should have been considered lucky to only be down like 16-12 going into halftime. I think Brock Purdy had 3 of his 4 interceptions in the first quarter or just early into the second quarter. And the Ravens only somehow got 16 total points out of that. So that's really unfortunate for them. But they ended up winning the game by double digits anyway. So that's really good. And oh man, I knew I was going to forget the last one. But oh, I think you mentioned it already. Brock Purdy, I only think 2 of those interceptions were really his fault. The last one, the Patrick Queen one, and then the first Kyle Hamilton one. It's just a misread, but nobody's perfect. I mean, he's been great all year. So, oh, I do remember my last point. This game, okay, I'm going to preface this by saying Christian McCaffrey is a phenomenal football player and one of the best running backs, honestly, to ever play the game with his skill set. But this game is why you can't give Christian McCaffrey the MVP this year because he had a phenomenal game this week, but it did not impact how the 49ers ran their offense. The quarterback position is way more valuable than any other position on the field. And if your quarterback is having a bad game, then your team is most likely going to have a bad game in general, and you are most likely going to lose that game, especially playing against a really good team like Baltimore. San Francisco, they needed a superstar level performance out of their quarterback who just didn't make mistakes, do what he normally did. But unfortunately, he made a couple of costly mistakes early. He just wasn't on time, on rhythm, or in rhythm a lot early in this game, and it kind of cost him. So, in my opinion, I don't think I have Christian McCaffrey in my top 3 in MVP voting. Brock Purdy, I think he's still probably in my top 5, but I'm not going to let one game diminish how great he's played his entire time as a 49er. So I think for next episode, I'll probably come up with a more solid list of my MVP rankings, maybe 1 to 3, 1 to 5. I don't know, but it's a little bold. But this is the type of game where Christian McCaffrey cannot be considered an MVP because the running back position, more often than not, does not impact winning as much as you think it does.
Yeah, but they were still able to move the ball pretty well. So I think that was mainly McCaffrey. But on to this game, it's only the second time ever that the teams with the sole possession of the best record in each conference played in week 16 or later. Big matchup. A lot of people expected the 49ers to go in there and Mike Florio especially beat the brakes off of the Ravens, and that just did not happen. Brock
Flores.
That was
Purdy.
amazing.
Yeah, Mike Flores. Yeah. Four interceptions for Purdy. Some were unlucky, but overall just didn't have it. Still finished with 255 passing yards. McCaffrey had a very solid game, 102 yards and a touchdown, 28 yards receiving. Set a franchise record with his 8th straight game with at least 100 yards from scrimmage. Luckily for the Niners, they do still control their own destiny with the first round bye, like you guys said. But on to the Ravens, Lamar, he just owns the NFC. He's 20-1 in games he starts. That's just a ridiculous record against the other conference. The only loss I looked it up was to the Giants. Surprisingly, I think it was last year. Lamar had 252 passing yards, 45 rushing yards, looked like an MVP candidate. He doesn't necessarily, I don't think he has the stats, but I mean, he's been one of the most impactful players in football no matter what. Zay Flowers, he's been great, 74 catches, 752 receiving yards, 5 total touchdowns. He's been an absolute fine for this offense. Great. Lamar finally has some weapons between Flowers. Likely's been pretty solid. Rashad Bateman has his moments. He's 9-1, Lamar, since tweeting the word Johnny, 98.9 passer rating. Ravens have been so good. Defensive side of the ball, they've been great. Kyle Hamilton has been a star. I never saw anything about his injury. Is he okay? Does anybody know?
I do not
I
know.
do not know.
I honestly kind of forgot about it.
Yeah, because I know he picked up the knee injury, but I saw him walking on the field after the game. He looked okay. So hopefully he's all right. Jadeveon Clowney has been very good for this defense. 8.5 sacks this year. He's only getting paid $2.5 million. He's been just a very good find for this defense. Every AFC North team could still finish above 500, which would be crazy, but the Ravens are the best out of the bunch and just continue to win.
Yeah, just a couple things I wanted to address on the MVP situation before we move on to studs and duds here. What you said, Zach. I don't necessarily disagree. I think if you really look into because when the MVP debate happens in any sport, I mean, let's be honest, it should just be the best player. Then you get the side you start talking about you get the guys who are valuable. It's in those guys on Twitter. And I understand that point. If it is most valuable, I think that point makes a ton of sense. But then, and this isn't what happened this year, obviously, with Purdy. But what if you have a situation where a team goes 17-0? Their quarterback has been great all season, leads everybody in a ton of stats, but he's had a few, like 3, 4, 5 games where he looked bad. Purdy's really only had 1 or 2. But let's just say they've had a ton of games where they look bad, but they
I think he's
still
had like
have
3 or 4, really.
yeah.
Their
Regardless,
3-game slide, a good portion of it was him just not being great because he lost a couple guys with injury.
exactly. So that's why I don't think this situation applies to Purdy. But let's just say they have the best record in the league. The quarterback's had a ton of bad games, but overall his stats are pretty solid. He hasn't wowed anybody similar to Purdy this year, hasn't wowed anybody on what he's done. And then you have your running back who's dominated every single game, but in those losses, it hasn't mattered because the quarterback hasn't played well. Yes, in that situation, does that mean the quarterback's more valuable? Yes, but the quarterback is the most valuable position in all of sports. So if we're just going to use that, then at this point, it's just a quarterback award because you get the added bonus of that. If we're talking about who's had the better season, it's Christian McCaffrey. If that's what we're talking about, he's had the better season. Regardless, I think it is Lamar now because the quarterback position does matter, and that plays a giant factor in the MVP. It's just how it's always been. It's not going to change. The Heisman, we saw it. They did change it. The Heisman, I don't think does the Heisman Trophy have valuable in it?
I don't know, but I wanted
but
to
it's just best player,
Yeah,
most outstanding.
how it
I
should
think.
be.
most
Yeah, I
outstanding,
think it is
right?
most outstanding. Yeah,
Which I
This
think is a better
situation,
description of what it should be.
I agree. It shouldn't be most valuable. That doesn't make any sense.
this situation with this MVP this year reminds me of a couple years ago when it was between Devontae Smith and Mac Jones, and Devontae Smith did end up winning it. So
Exactly.
Right.
But that brings us back to it's two different trophies, and we know how the NFL looks
that's
at it.
true.
Right.
That's
So
true.
I don't know. If I had a vote, if I had to make a prediction of what I think they're gonna do, I think they give it to Lamar. Best record in the league, quarterback has completely transcended how he's played his game. Mike and I were talking about it last night. Just turning himself into a passer and being a less aggressive runner while still getting rushing yards is super impressive, and he deserves all the credit in the world for that. But if I'm getting a vote, I'm voting Christian McCaffrey. I just am.
I think. Oh, I'm trying to think. I think you could have instead of. This is such a weird way to put it, but I think you should have like an offensive MVP and then a defensive MVP,
They
and then
do.
and then the most outstanding offensive player, then the most outstanding defensive player. rather than like MVP and then offensive player of the year and defensive player of the year. You should have one for each side of the ball. Because for me, I think I might have TJ Watt in my MVP conversation at like the 4 or 5 spot. Because, I mean, what do you value more? 2,000 total yard scrimmage season from a running back or a 20 plus sack season from an edge rusher?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I'm probably taking the edge rusher, but
Exactly. So it's really tough. So I think the only way to solve, I think offensively, the only way to solve that is obviously, I think MVP is a quarterback dominated award. I'm not saying it should be that way, but it always has been and it probably always will be for the foreseeable future. But that's why offensive player of the year exists, where guys like Tyreek Hill, who was really close to breaking 2,000 yards prior to those injuries that he had, Justin Jefferson, who, if he didn't get hurt, he was probably going to be up there in the 1,800, 1,900 yard mark, probably 11 or 12 touchdowns at least. And then Christian McCaffrey, who's, I think, over 2,000 scrimmage yards this year. So that's why Offensive Player of the Year exists. I think CMC, in my opinion, Lamar MVP, and then CMC at Offensive Player of the Year. And probably CeeDee Lamb at a close second behind. Ooh, but then you got to have Tyreek Hill in there. Oh, man. There's not enough awards to go around for all the talent in this
Tyreek,
league.
it's Tyreek and CMC for offense. I don't think you can
Yeah.
argue anybody else. It's those two.
Yeah. I mean, CD has just been so impressive too.
I'd
But
argue it should be those two for MVP, but they're not going to do that.
but comparing CD to Tyreek and CMC, I think you have to have like Tyreek and CMC, then a tier below CD.
I agree.
Too much
Yeah.
talent. I hate it.
Yeah, for MVP, I probably got Lamar right now. CMC runner up. Just like you guys, CMC then Opoy, and then just two quick dark horses. I'd put Tua and Josh Allen. If they can just go off these last 2 weeks, they play each other week 18. If one of them goes off in that big game, maybe they can sneak their way into the conversation.
I
I
would
still
say
like Dak as
Tua
well.
maybe Josh Allen. I don't think you can argue that. I mean, he
I mean,
lost
he
his
has
team
the.
games early,
I mean, he
like
has the numbers though.
on him.
But I mean, Josh Allen
Yeah, he's gonna
also
have the
he
numbers.
just his hero ball is like a blessing and a curse because when he plays well, it's like, oh man, they won because of him because he makes some crazy play where he's jumping over a 6'4" linebacker. But at the same time, like early in the year, like you just mentioned, Mike, that Jets game, if he doesn't play hero ball and doesn't throw those 3 picks, they don't even go to overtime and they're not even worried about fighting against this clusterfuck of teams in the wild card situation. They might be even looking at the division because they start out hot. They don't have to worry about any, like, what's the word? Demoralizing losses. Because, I mean, losing on a punt return in OT is so brutal. And that kind of put their season off to a rough note to start. So instead of going 3-1 to start, they're 4-0 and they're maybe just continue to keep winning. They could be sitting at 11 and what is it, 4 right now if they don't lose those games that they shouldn't have lost, like Patriots game or
I'm
that
gonna
week
go
one
and
against the Jets.
I'm gonna go and clickbait this episode and call it "Is Josh Allen an MVP candidate?" But get everyone pissed
It's
off.
one thing we talk about at the very
I
end, and it just
I
keeps
think
people
he's.
in.
Yeah,
I mean, he's third in touchdowns, sixth in yards, second in QB ratings. If he finds a way to win these last two games,
Yeah.
maybe if the Dolphins slip up next week, I don't know who has the tiebreaker. Well, the Bills would have the
The
tiebreaker.
Bills
So
would because they swept Dolphins.
yeah. So dark horse, he's what
I mean, you said it
plus
before. He's
1400.
got this is his fourth straight year
plus
with 40 plus
1,400.
total
Yeah.
touchdowns. I mean, he's a really good guy. I mean, he's real good. There's a lot of guys you can make an argument for MVP for, or even Offensive Player of the Year, and I like that. I like when there's a lot of variety in the voting, where not one guy is running away with it. When there's a group of 5 to 6 who you could really call for it, and you can make your argument for them, and most of your points will be valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of great players, we should move into studs and duds.
Can I go first this
For
week? I got to tackle something before you get to
you
it,
can go
Josh.
first, but I know you don't have mine.
Oh,
What do you
okay.
got?
Probably not. Unfortunately,
Mine are definitely being taken.
I wanted to start with my dud. Uh, you were the big man the first time we brought up this segment, Josh. You put up the Lions offensive line for that one. It hurts me to say this, but DJ Moore is my dud of the week against the relatively weak Cardinals secondary. Only 3 catches for 18 yards. You got to hope for a little bit more, even though you are hurt. But you are right. It is week 16. No one is 100% healthy. All those hits do take a toll. But this recent injury, it's not an entire excuse to put up a rough game against an iffy secondary at best. So DJ Moore is my dud of the week. Sad. But my stud of the week, I talked about it before. Jason Sanders, 5 for 5 on field goals with the game winner as time expired. Hey, I was
like
hyping him up early before. I
I
was
did
trying
have
to
your
hint, I was
I did have
trying to
yours.
hint at it before, but
I did
he's
have
my stud
yours,
of
is
the
what I'm
week.
saying. I shouldn't have let you go before me.
I'm just saying he was great, and I gotta respect the kickers, especially Cairo Santos, very underrated season. But stud of the week is Jason Sanders, 5 for 5, with the winner this week.
Well, that's crazy. Because we're giving a lot of love to the kickers this week. I had three studs. Jason Sanders, 5 for 5, 1 for 1 on extra points. Youngwei Koo, 5 for 5, 2 for 2 on extra points. And Dicker the kicker, 5 for 5, 1 for 1 on extra points. Shout out the kickers. It's crazy that we happen to have the same one there, but um, regardless, moving on to my dud. DJ Moore was one of mine, of course. He was horrible. He's not top 10 in any receiving
Let's simmer
stat.
down a little bit.
He's not, I mean, it's just he's just not top 10 in any
You
receiving
saying he's
stat.
horrible? Let's slow down a
He had
little
a
bit.
horrible week. I said he had a horrible week.
Yeah, yeah, I
He's
know.
not horrible. I don't think he's a bad receiver. I think he's a good receiver.
I
Top
would
five
hope
was
not.
crazy.
I don't
And
think it's
Debo
crazy.
over Debo is really crazy. But moving on to my actual dud, Debo's quarterback, we just talked about it, Brock Purdy. Sub 60% complete. I left you Amari Cooper. Okay, buddy, you can
Yeah, I know how
you
it
can
went.
quit it. I left you Amari Cooper. Brock Purdy, sub 60% completion percentage, 0 touchdowns, 4 picks. We talked about not all those picks probably being his fault, but regardless, you have 0 touchdowns, 4 picks as the leading MVP candidate. I think that has to put you in a dud. So I have the three kickers, Sanders, Youngwei Koo, and Dicker as my studs, and Brock Purdy as my dud.
Yeah, for my start of the week, I'll go with Amari Cooper then. 11 catches, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. Killed my fantasy football
250,
playoff hopes.
256.
265.
Yeah, you said 100. I was just making sure
Oh, yeah,
that.
265. Killed my fantasy football playoffs. Honorable mention, Kyle Hamilton, 2 picks. He had a great game last night, and I looked it up. He says it should be all right. For my dud of the week, I had Brock Purdy. You took him. I'll go with Darren Waller. He's just not good. 2 catches for 32 yards. He fucking sucks. He's terrible. He can't catch the football. And yeah, he's just not good.
Those
Doesn't
are
have a great
personal
quarterback. Kid
studs and
sucks.
duds for you.
That was, yeah.
But we'll end this episode here. We've been yapping for a while now. We will be back most likely. All right, this video is going up Wednesday. We will most likely be back Thursday, so tomorrow for the week 17 preview. What else will we talk about that? You know what? I don't know what we're gonna talk about else on that episode, but we got
We'll
week
see it when it
17
happens.
preview for sure. No recaps because we got through the entire slate today on this episode. But yeah, maybe we'll talk some awards or some playoff stuff. I'm sure we'll get sidetracked into some of that. But as always, like and subscribe. Follow all of our socials in the description. We have our Spotify down there as well. If you don't want to look at us, you just want to hear what we have to say, you can go on there, give us a rate and whatnot, download the episodes, do what you got to do. And we'll see everybody in the next one.